is no magic button. There's no place that for you as a mortgage professional, mortgage broker can go to a web page, whatever it might be, and there's a big shiny button on the page that if you click it, and the button says use AI, and you click the button that says use AI, and just like that, your business is better. There is no button that exists like that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. Of course, I'm your host, Tom. This week, you can call it a bit of a cop-out. I'm not going to call it that because I think there's a ton of great stuff to talk about as it relates to this topic, which is my recap of the National Mortgage Conference. My last episode was what am I looking forward to? This one is the recap. So that's why I'm like, is it a cop-out? I don't know. I'm saying no because there is a ton of great content. I talk about the talk that I gave and really kind of the follow-up questions that I had. I go on a mini rant there, so I get a little bit passionate about some of this AI stuff. But if you are as well, and if you're kind of maybe getting frustrated that you still haven't had a great application of AI, this rant is for you. I also circle back on other themes I've talked about, like privacy and tech coming back in a big way in the mortgage space. So if you're interested in any of that, you're going to love the episode. We'll see you on the other side. Okay, so let's get into it here. Yes, just got back from the National Mortgage Conference. Going to do my tech spin on it, what I thought, and really some takeaways, maybe where I was right, maybe where I was wrong in some cases. Just to recap, when I talked about it, what I'm looking forward to, the first thing I talked about was Ben Tal's speech, which was good. He didn't talk about rental. Maybe that's something that mortgage brokers don't want to hear. If you guys didn't hear that episode, I recently listened to one of his podcasts, is Ben Tal's, and he talked a lot about how rental is basically going to be the new normal, or it should be. People aren't going to own houses, ... You can fill in the blanks. Didn't bring that up here. Maybe makes sense. So that was okay. Second one was Doug Adlam's talk about the business of brokering. It's great presentation. Nothing, I think, too much beyond what I kind of already mentioned in my previous, episode. So I'll leave it at that. And then the third one, of course, was my talk, which is a bit of a cheat. But I'll talk about that as well. So that's really kind of, I think, what a lot of this episode will be about, is kind of some of the takeaways from my speech and some of the other things that I saw there. So the first thing I want to talk about, and this is actually a public service announcement that after the National Mortgage Conference, I think needs to be said. It absolutely needs to be said. I'm going to put this on my bumper sticker, as a bumper sticker somewhere. Maybe I'll make them. And the PSA is this: there is no magic button. Okay. There's no silver bullet. Okay. What do I mean by that? There is no button, and I'll get into why I'm saying this in a second, but there's no place that for you as a mortgage professional, a mortgage broker can go to a web page, whatever it might be, and there's a big shiny button on the page that if you click it, and the button says use AI, and you click the button that says use AI, and just like that, your business is better. There is no button that exists like that. At least, not really that I know of. And honestly, I'm confident that doesn't exist anywhere, right? And the reason I'm so confident that doesn't exist anywhere is because if it did exist, just imagine that, right? Hey, there's this web page out there. My buddy told me about it, where I go there, I click a button, and my business doubles. That would spread like wildfire, right? Everyone would know about it, and they know about it overnight. And there would be no conversation, there'd be no conferences, there would be no speeches like people like me trying to tell people how to use AI. There'd be none of that, right? And if there was that, like I said, it would be figured out almost overnight. And I would submit to you, in a sense, that ChatGPT kind of was that. Like, it is still kind of magic. Like, you go to this website and you ask it questions. You say, why is my dog sick? Or tell me a story so I can feel less. I don't know. You can ask it all sorts of things, and it gives you magical answers back. And no one cares about that. So it's kind of one of these crazy things where, if the button existed, you would have hit it so quickly. That's the first thing that would have happened. And then number two, it would be part of your baseline almost overnight, right? In a sense, the internet is like a magic button. What? Go back 100 years. There's this place I can go to, and I can talk like I am right now to a camera, right? Which is also a new technology 100 years ago. And I can just talk about random stuff, and I click a couple buttons, and boom, people across the globe can hear me talk about random mortgage tech stuff. That is magic, right? But no one gets excited about that anymore, because it's just like, yeah, we get it. We know what it is. And if this went away, we'd be super upset. So it's kind of this weird human thing where even if the magic button existed, which again, I think ChatGPT is that magic button, we click it and then we just assume that that magic button is always there and it's not magic anymore. That's the first thing. And why am I talking about this? Why is that? Because really that's the result of so many, I think, talks out there, is that people ask questions, say, how can I use it? How can I use it? And so I'll kind of give two examples. So the first thing that I see, so I'll talk about mine and why I'm kind of getting all riled up about this is because, I think I kind of took one approach, which some I've talked about on this podcast before, which is simply, hey, I talked about, why does my job feel the same? A lot of that has to do with why do mortgage brokers exist, right? What do they differentiate on? And my answer is trust, right? And we can go into that and you can disagree or whatever. But the point is that trust isn't getting disrupted by AI, right? Trust is still a human to human thing. It'll always be there. Those people who use trust, which is most of the market, to generate their business, they're kind of doing the same thing that they've always done. And then there are other people, maybe call it 10, 20% of the market, who are doing a podcast, who are doing some good social media, who have an amazing tech stack that makes them so efficient. They can apply AI to those domains that allow them to, scale that part of it. But at the end of the day, what is the foundation of all brokering? I think it's trust. So that was the nature of my talk. And then I went on to say, and so the AI tool that makes sense for you depends on that second part, right? How do you apply your trust at scale, right? Do you go out and do a podcast? Do you do social media? Do you have great technology? Do you have a great team that you've operationalized and great assistants and done that? Do you have a great referral partner network program, whatever it might be, to really incentivize and reward your referral partners? And then answer that question, how do you differentiate? And then the answer of what AI is right for you will come out of that. And again, this is kind of the punchline of this whole thing. Well, I'm getting so worked up because I, deliver this whole speech, I do this whole thing. And then of course, the very first question, but what should just be one tool that I use, right? That's the first question. And I get it, right? You want the easy answer. You're basically asking, but where's the magic button? And the answer is there's no magic button. It depends. You have to go super deep into understanding. And I'll give an example, a very specific example of, yes, there's no magic button, but that doesn't mean that AI is useless. So actually two examples I'll give. One, so someone came up to me afterwards and asked the same question. Hey, but what's just one tool that I use? And now that I'm not on the stage, I can actually get into it with this person. And I said, I basically did that whole spiel. I said, I don't know. Like, what's your problem right now? What's going on? And we went in a circle and we talked about a bunch of stuff. And they did identify, not even with me prompting them, they said, hey, I'd love to have my phone calls recorded or have, basically all the things that I talk about on the phone, because I'm on the phone all day long, somehow collected and documented and put in a place I can see. I say, perfect. Use one of these Fathom or Firefly.ai. And we've talked about those on this podcast before, which are these AI note takers, things that can jump onto your Zoom calls and literally sit there and take notes, right? And then summarize those notes and give them to you. Boom, mind blown. And that's interesting, right? But I couldn't have said that from the beginning. I mean, sure, I could give 100 tools and you can go one by one and you can see which applies to your situation. But I'd rather go the other way, understand your situation and apply the right tool. Another one, which I thought was crazy but very interesting, is that I talked to this lady, and I hope she doesn't mind sharing this, where she basically talked about how they used AI, OCR, to go through these, I think they're like fire binders. I think it's just basically fire policies for insurance or something like that. And they used AI tools, an in-house AI tool, to kind of read through it and summarize and do sorts of things. And it was a huge success. Right. And I think they had a bunch of good business results. I don't know specifically, but the point is that if I got on stage and said, use it to read your fire binder, people would leave the room, right? Because again, people don't want to hear that, right? People don't want to get into the details, but that's where the gains are, right? Get into those details, understand the problems of your business. You do have a unique business, even though you think you're in you are in the mortgage brokering space, and there are some overlaps. There are things that are very unique to you, and those are the places you should lead in. So one type of, talk. And I guess the only other kind of thing I'd say with all that is that sometimes, people kind of get, people come on stage, and there was a gentleman who did a talk at the very beginning of the conference. I think it was a great talk and he's a great presenter, and I'm not criticizing him specifically, just kind of as it relates to this point, where they'll come on stage and they'll kind of do like a magic button lite as in LITE, like not heavy, but light. And what it is, like, he came on stage, talked about, hey, I went to this restaurant in Cambodia and they used WhatsApp to coordinate and their clients or their employees type into WhatsApp what they did that day, and that feeds their payroll, and AI summarizes it and generalizes it. And for a second, for you sitting there in the seat as a mortgage broker, that dopamine in your brain kind of kicks in and says, is that a magic button? Is that a magic button I can press and it'll, do all these crazy things? And the short answer, of course, is not, because first of all, not very many of us have, a huge staff of people that we need to manage. And that's not the biggest problem in our business. So even if we did go through it and we had a big staff and we fix all the things, it's going to adjust a very small part of what our business is. It doesn't have any lasting impact. And then we get that little hit and we get excited. We go home. We don't do it because it's not going to amount to anything. And then we come back next year for the same talk and we get that hit again and we get excited, and it's this doom loop. So again, I don't want to criticize this gentleman individually, but I've seen 1,000 of those talks. And I think that's almost maybe a disservice. Maybe part of it is like, that's what now you and the audience are coming to expect. You come to a talk like mine where maybe I don't go that way, where I maybe try to give you a bit of hard truth. Not that I'm perfect with it. And you don't want to hear the hard truth because you're used to the dopamine hits from the other guys. So I don't know. That's my mini rant there. And, at the end of the day, for me as a speaker, I'm just always trying to provide value. And, for the mortgage brokers out there, I think you got to decide for yourself what you want, right? Out of these conferences, out of listen to a podcast like mine. Do you want the dopamine hit? Do you want me to just come in here and say a bunch of cool tools and you say cool and you get excited and then maybe implement, maybe not? Or do you want to get into it and say, what is the biggest problem in my business? Is it a fire binder? If it's a fire binder, how do I apply AI to this fire binder to achieve business results, right? That's really have to decide for yourself and your business. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. Two other really quick takeaways. This will be generally probably another quicker episode. The first one is just about privacy. And, I do want to revisit this. I had an episode like 2 or 3 weeks ago, which I kind of ripped it apart. Where I said, I hate people talking about privacy and AI and security. And now Sam Altman has all my data. And my criticism was that basically 2 things. One, how is it any different than Gmail, right? Gmail is, I know hundreds of mortgage brokers use Gmail. It's a US company. They can see all the data. And people say, well, what if ChatGPT gets hacked? Yeah, what if Gmail gets hacked, right? It's all the same arguments across the board, up and down. So I still maintain that. And I also maintain my other criticism is that a lot of people just use it as a crutch, right? They'd say, hey, I'd love to hit the magic button, or I'd love to go and do the fire binder work. I'm using this as an example, that hard work to really actually use AI in a meaningful way, but I can't because of privacy and security. Well, and it really, I think at the end of the day, they just don't want to do the hard work, which is actually going through the fire binder and figuring out what they need to do. It's much easier to say, I wish I could, but I can't. So those were my criticisms. And the only kind of revision I'd say is coming out of this conference. First of all, it's very top of mind. Every question coming out of all these sessions, what about privacy? What about security? Blah, blah, blah. And I addressed it almost 10 times in my time there, because not just in the talk, but people coming up afterwards. But the only valid thing, and one particular lady brought this up, which I think is a good point. She's like, I get it. I can, read the regulations. And this is kind of my call to action is don't be scared of it, but read the regulation, understand your obligations, and then just make sure you're staying within the lines. And you can use ChatGPT within the lines of those regulations. She said, I could go and do that. But as you know, these regulations aren't black and white. Right? It's not like do this and don't do that, right? There is some gray in there. And with gray becomes interpretation. And I don't want to be the guinea pig in a court case to determine if my interpretation of the gray area is right or wrong. And that's a little bit what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, where it's like Gmail is known by the regulators. The regulators, okay, you're using Gmail in that way, you're good, right? There's precedent. But there's less precedent, I guess, from a legal perspective for using these AI tools in a specific way. So I'll give credit where credit is due in that sense, where hey, you don't want to plug your ears and shove your head in the sand because of regulation and security and all these things you're scared of. But there is a little bit of risk simply based on the precedent. It's the technology itself is not more risky. It's how the regulators view that technology. So I'll just kind of leave that credit where it's credit due. I still don't think that means you should be scared of it. I just think, fair enough, there is a little bit of a distinction from how people interpret these technologies, not in the technology itself. And sometimes I get my head in the sand where I'm more on the tech side of things, where I just say, well, the technology is the same. At the end of the day, the data is going in the same places. It's still the same exposure from a encryption perspective. But there's a human component too, of course, which is how regulators interpret and you as a user interpret these regulations. Okay, and then the last thing here, I talked about 3 weeks ago ish, 4 weeks, I don't know, maybe a bit for longer ago, how mortgage tech is making a comeback. And I definitely saw it there. It's exciting. It's awesome. I love it. A couple quick shout outs. I'll just kind of rattle them off. Matt at Prepayment Penalty Mentor, or he's created kind of like a calculator, an online tool for that. So he's taken what has been a very successful business for him and he's making it more accessible to more people. So that was one that he saw there, and he had a booth and it was constantly full, that booth. And so that was great to see for him. Mentor is the name of the business, penaltymentor.ca. And you can even see there, he's got a mobile app and a bunch of stuff to help with that stuff. So that was great to see. He's kind of taking a service business, applying a tech layer. That was awesome. Another huge thing related to kind of these home valuation engagement type tools. We talked about them a bunch on the podcast. The two I saw there, one was Dan McDonald from Ownwell. He had his own booth right across from ours, actually, so I was able to interact with him a bit. But his first year with the booth, obviously investing. Technology's gotten to a point where he's ready to really kind of bring it to the masses. That's great to see. And then, of course, BrokerBot too. Scott Larder, he's another gentleman we've had on the podcast. He actually stepped down. He was kind of doing both BrokerBot and something else. He stepped down from that other role so he could be 100% focused on BrokerBot. And he had a booth there. And if that's not a testament to, where this industry is going to go, or we'll leave it at that, where this industry is going to go and the growth that's going to exist in this industry. I don't know what is, right? Because these tech companies, if you're probably stepping down from a role, you probably got some funding, and to go out and get funding, you got to convince very smart people with, lots of money and lots of experience that says, hey, this technology is good and it's going into a market, it's served a market that's only going to grow. And that's great to see there too. So those home valuation tools. And then the last one, PureLend, I talked about them again a couple of weeks ago. We saw them there. They're kind of mixing it up. They didn't have a booth, but again, I think they're having some meetings and different things like that. So all good things to see. So innovation is alive and well. I think it is accelerating, and I'm excited to see where it continues to go. So we'll leave it at that. I had a mini rant at the beginning of this episode, but wanted to kind of circle back on a couple points I've talked about previously on this episode, namely about privacy and how mortgage tech is kind of in a renaissance right now after a bit of a winter since 2021. So it's exciting times. I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much, guys, for listening or watching if you're on YouTube, and we'll see you next week.